The celestial assembly was built to intimidate. It floated in orbit around Ellera, a world so pristine it looked artificial, its clouds drifting in mathematically perfect spirals, its oceans reflecting starlight like polished glass. From space, the assembly resembled a ring of white fire encircling the planet, thousands of interlocked structures glowing with soft, dignified light. Inside, it was vast beyond reason. The chamber could host delegates from over 5,000 known civilizations. Tier upon tier of seating rows in smooth curves, each section adapted to its occupants, gravitic fields for those who floated, liquid chambers for those who swam, pressure domes, energy lattices, crystalline perches. Every seat was filled. Every sensor was active. Every eye, lens, and field of perception was focused on a single figure standing alone at the center platform. Commander Elia Saren stood perfectly still. By Terran standards, she was unremarkable, average height, lean frame, dark hair pulled tightly behind her head. The black diplomatic uniform of the Terran Union clung to her like a shadow, its surface matte, functional, undecorated except for a small silver insignia at her collar. To the assembly, however, she was something else entirely. She was human. A species classified as Category Apex Hazard. A species denied entry 16 times. This was the 17th. The silence in the chamber was absolute, the kind of silence that felt engineered. Even beings incapable of hearing could sense it, an absence of motion, a collective holding of breath. Elia did not shift her weight. She did not fidget. She had learned long ago that stillness unsettled them more than anything else. Above her, suspended in the center of the chamber, a sphere of light pulsed once. The arch-mediator emerged from it. He was called Veil Torin, though he was a human convenience. His form resembled a lattice of translucent strands woven into something vaguely humanoid, each filament glowing with faint internal luminescence. When he moved, the strands flowed rather than bent, like light trying to imitate flesh. His voice did not travel through the air. It resonated directly inside every mind present. The assembly acknowledges the petition of the species designated humanity, originating from Sol System, third planetary body. No emotion. No warmth. No hostility. Just procedure. Elia felt thousands of perceptions tighten around her. Veil Torin continued. Before deliberation, the assembly will review the standing classification of the petitioning species. Of course it would. It always did. A structure unfolded above the chamber floor. A colossal projection, layers of data cascading into visible form. Stars ignited into existence, spiraling outward until a small yellow sun burned at the center. So, blue, deceptively calm. A secondary voice took over, artificial and clinical. Planetary origin, Sol 3. Common name, Earth. The world rotated slowly. Classification, extreme biosphere instability. The image fractured. Storm systems large enough to swallow continents. Lightning webs tearing through clouds. Volcanoes bleeding fire into the sky. Oceans rising in walls of moving destruction. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Dominant environmental traits, tectonic volatility. Atmospheric violence. Predatory evolutionary dominance. The projection shifted again. Plus, venom. Creatures colliding in bursts of motion and death. Bodies built not merely to survive but to hunt. To consume. To endure. Several delegates recoiled instinctively. The Luminari, beings of soft radiance who had evolved on a world without predation, dimmed noticeably, their glow flickering in discomfort. Elia kept her expression neutral. She had seen this montage 17 times. But the assembly was not finished. The projection narrowed. Humans appeared. Primitive at first. Stone tools. Fire. Small groups clustered around fragile light in an unforgiving dark. Dominant species, humanity. The voice remained coldly fascinated. Evolutionary strategy, persistence predation. Images accelerated. Running. Always running. Across plains. Through snow. Over deserts. Bodies pushing beyond visible limits. Muscles tearing, lungs burning. Primary adaptation, exceptional endurance capacity. Unusual resistance to pain and physiological stress. More images. Fractures. Blood. Still moving. Still fighting. The murmurs grew louder now, less analytical, more unsettled. The projection erupted into chaos. Blades. Ballistics. Explosions. Cities dissolving into ash. Machines designed with singular purpose, to destroy, to break, to end. The artificial voice continued without judgment. Behavioral pattern, continuous intraspecies conflict across recorded history. More escalation. Weaponization capability, planetary scale. A starflash. A bloom of annihilating light. The chamber dimmed automatically to compensate. Psychological marker, high tolerance for violence exposure. The final sequence began. Human soldiers. Outnumbered. Outgunned. Laughing. Not hysterical laughter. Not madness. Something worse. Familiarity. Comfort inside catastrophe. The projection vanished. The chamber light stabilized. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Veiltorin turned toward Elia Saren, his luminous strands tightening into sharper lines. Standing classification confirmed. The pause. Humanity remains designated category apex hazard. Every perception in the assembly sharpened. The arch-mediator's voice resonated once more. The petitioner may now speak. Elia Saren stepped forward. The movement was small. Measured. Human. Yet the effect was immediate. Across the celestial assembly, thousands of delegates reacted in ways both subtle and obvious. Fields tightened. Defensive membranes sealed. Bioluminescent patterns shifted toward caution hues. Even species that possessed no visible expression registered the change through micro-adjustments in sensor arrays. Humans moved like predators. Not because of speed. Because of intention. Veiltorin did not acknowledge the tension. Petitioner Elia Saren of humanity, his voice resonated, before argument is presented, supplementary classification analysis will be entered into record. Elia did not blink. Of course there was supplementary analysis. There was always more. The projection sphere ignited again. But this time the imagery was different. Not chaos. Not war. Precision. Behavioral addendum, humanity. The chamber filled with data constructs, neural maps, probability webs, layered simulations of human decision-making patterns. The artificial voice returned. Human cognition exhibits anomalous adaptive volatility. A human brain appeared, rotating slowly, every synaptic pathway rendered in luminous detail. Unlike most known species, humanity does not optimize for stability. Simulations unfolded. A problem introduced. Humans responding with multiple conflicting strategies simultaneously. Failure. Adjustment. Failure again. Improvisation. Primary cognitive strategy. Iterative adaptation under uncertainty. The projection accelerated. Environmental disaster, human innovation, technological limitation, human circumvention system collapse, human restructuring. Humans demonstrate persistent behavioral restructuring in response to hostile conditions. Another shift. Social models. Hierarchies forming, fracturing, reforming. Alliances. Conflicts. Cooperation emerging not from harmony, but friction. Conflict engagement is not exclusively destructive. The pause. It functions as a catalyst for accelerated problem solving. This time, the murmurs were uneasy rather than fearful. For most assembly species, conflict represented failure. For humans, the data implied something more disturbing. Utility. The projection continued. Human emotional mapping. Fear centers igniting. Stress hormones surging. Decision-making pathways lighting up brighter, faster. Stress response profile. Enhancement rather than degradation. Several delegates shifted sharply. That was not normal. Across the assembly, stress impaired. Stress destabilized. Stress reduced function. Yet the simulations showed humans operating with increased clarity, increased focus, Increased aggression toward problem resolution. High-threat environments produce elevated performance metrics. More data. Human cooperation models. Individuals acting against self-preservation probabilities. Entering lethal scenarios. Protecting unrelated entities. Altruistic override mechanism detected. Images layered over statistics. A human running into flame. Another diving into collapsing structures. Another moving toward hostile fire. Humans regularly engage in high-risk protective behaviors toward non-kin. The artificial voice remained disturbingly calm. Motivational structure, non-linear. New simulations. Rational survival models failing to predict human choices. Probability trees splintering. Outcomes diverging wildly. Human decision patterns resist deterministic modeling. That line landed harder than the war montage. Civilizations built on prediction systems found unpredictability intolerable. But the analysis had not reached its most uncomfortable conclusion. The projection darkened. A galactic map appeared. Conflict zones across human history marked in red. Innovation spikes marked in gold. The overlap was impossible to ignore. Observed pattern. Technological accelerations strongly correlated with crisis exposure. A pause stretched across the chamber. Conclusion. The voice seemed to echo. Humanity evolves fastest when threatened. The lights dimmed again. Final data construct. A comparative projection. Most species, threat equals contraction. Humanity's threat equals expansion. Risk assessment summary. The artificial voice delivered the verdict without hesitation. Humanity does not merely survive hostile environments. The beat. Humanity is strengthened by them. Silence flooded the chamber. Heavy. Uneasy. Not fear alone now. Something closer to existential discomfort. Because this classification did not describe a dangerous animal. It described a dangerous trajectory. Veiltorin's luminous strands shifted, settling into rigid symmetry. Supplementary classification entered into record. The pause. Petitioner Elia Saren may now address the assembly. 5,000 civilizations waited. 5,000 judgments already formed. 5,000 minds expecting denial. Elia Saren inhaled slowly. And finally, she spoke. Everything you have shown, she said quietly, is correct. The reaction was instantaneous. Across the celestial assembly, perception fields rippled like a disturbed ocean. Defensive systems, subtly primed for argumentative resistance, hesitated. Several delegates leaned forward. Others froze entirely. Agreement was not the expected response. Denial was predictable. Defensiveness was comfortable. But confession destabilized narratives. Elia Saren stood alone beneath 5,000 civilizations and did not raise her voice. Your data is accurate, she continued. Our world is violent. Our history is violent. Our species is difficult. The projection sphere above remained dark now, as though even the assembly wished to hear this without interruption. We evolved in instability, Elia said. On a planet where the ground itself tried to kill us. Where the sky burned, the seas rose, the land cracked, and nearly everything that moved had teeth. Images did not appear. They did not need to. Every being present had already seen Earth's brutality rendered in exhausting detail. We are persistence predators, she said. A murmur trembled through the chamber. Elia nodded slightly. Yes. That part is true too. She let the discomfort breathe. We are capable of extraordinary violence, she said. We have waged wars that reshaped our planet. We have built weapons that could erase our own civilization. The pause. We have used them. The silence tightened. But Elia Saren's expression did not shift. Because now came the pivot. And yet, she said softly, we are still here. That landed differently. Not defensive. Not boastful. Simply factual. We did not survive because we are the strongest species, she continued. We are not. We are fragile. So, easily damaged. She flexed one gloved hand slightly. We survived because we adapt faster than the things trying to kill us. The assembly's attention sharpened. The tone had changed. No longer confession. Explanation. You classify us as a hazard, Elia said, turning slowly, deliberately, allowing the entire chamber to feel included in her gaze. You are correct. A ripple of unease. But hazard, she continued, is not the same as malevolence. There was. The thesis pivot. Veil Torin's luminous strands flickered faintly, not emotion, but heightened processing. Elia activated her own projector. Compared to the assembly's monumental systems, the Terran device was almost embarrassingly small. The imagery it produced, however, filled the chamber with something the earlier montages had not. Stillness. Quiet. A human firefighter carrying a child through smoke. A medic pressing trembling hands against a wound. A rescue diver vanishing beneath freezing water. A civilian shielding another during structural collapse. No spectacle. No weapons. Just humans moving toward danger. Not away. We are dangerous, Elia said. The images continued. We run toward instability. Another sequence. Disaster zones. Human responders arriving. Fin. Not because we do not feel fear, she said. Human neural mapping appeared, heart rate spikes, stress responses, biochemical surges. We feel fear intensely. The assembly shifted. That contradicted several long-standing assumptions. We move toward danger, Elia said, because something on the other side of it needs help. The words resonated across the chamber with a weight data could never achieve. For humanity, she continued, danger is not merely threat. The beat. It is summons. Silence. Absolute. Elia let the projector fade. You study predation, she said. You study survival behaviors. You study conflict dynamics. Her eyes moved to Veil Torin. But your models contain a flaw. A tension spike rippled through the assembly. You assume that the capacity for violence defines intent. Another beat. It does not. Elia Saren straightened slightly. A scalpel is dangerous. A flicker of recognition across multiple species. A reactor core is dangerous. More recognition. A star is dangerous. Now the chamber was perfectly still. Danger, she said quietly, is power without context. The final reversal line. Humanity is not dangerous because we seek destruction. The pause. We are dangerous because we refuse surrender. The silence that followed was no longer fear. It was impact. We do not ask you to erase our past, Elia said. Her voice remained calm, steady, human. We ask you to understand our function. She turned slowly, encompassing 5,000 civilizations. When systems fail, she said. When structures collapse. When something vast and indifferent emerges from the dark. Her eyes hardened just slightly. We are the species you call. The words settled into the assembly like gravity. We are not your greatest risk. The beat. We are your worst-case contingency. Veil Torin's luminous form tightened. The chamber held its breath. Elia Saren finished. Hazard, she said softly, is not the same as evil. And the assembly went utterly silent. For a moment that stretched impossibly long, nothing moved. No light fluctuations. No defensive field adjustments. No atmospheric ripples. 5,000 civilizations sat suspended in a silence so deep it felt like pressure. Elia Saren stood at the center platform, hands resting calmly behind her back, her expression unreadable even by human standards. She had learned patience the hard way. Veil Torin's luminous filaments shifted at last, drawing inward, tightening into precise geometric alignment. Decision posture. Argument entered into assembly record. No emotion. No acknowledgement. Procedure. Always procedure. Deliberation sequence initiated. The projection sphere ignited. Not with imagery. With numbers. Voting matrices cascaded across the chamber, probability webs linking delegates, civilizations, coalitions. Choices registered not through raised hands or spoken declarations, but through instantaneous neural consensus systems. Across the assembly, decisions were made in silence. Some reflexive, some agonized, some already predetermined centuries ago. Elia did not look at the display. She never did. Hope, she had discovered years earlier, was easier to manage when not visually quantified. The chamber lights dimmed subtly as the calculation engines processed. Seconds passed. They always took seconds. For a civilization-spanning institution, humanity's fate required very little time. The numbers stabilized. Brilliant. Unforgiving. Projected large enough that even species without visual perception could interpret them through encoded translation fields. Petition result. Denied. A secondary breakdown unfolded beneath it. In favor, 1,184 opposed, 3,902 abstained, 417. A murmur rippled outward. But it was not surprise. It was ritual release. The kind of reaction that followed inevitability. Vale Torin turned toward Elia Saren. His voice resonated through the chamber with the same terrible neutrality. The petition of humanity is rejected. No pause. No softening. Standing classification remains unchanged. The words fell like cold metal. Humanity retains designation, category apex hazard. Elia Saren's face did not move. Not a flicker. Not a tightening of the jaw. Not even a blink. 17 petitions had taught her the futility of visible disappointment. The petitioner is acknowledged for compliance with assembly protocol. A dismissal disguised as courtesy. This session is concluded. The projection sphere dimmed. The voting matrices dissolved. 5,000 civilizations relaxed almost simultaneously, tension bleeding from the chamber like released pressure. It was over. Elia Saren gave a small, perfectly measured nod. Respectful. Professional. Human. She turned from the center platform and began the walk. The floor of the assembly chamber was a single uninterrupted surface of pale alloy, polished to mirror smoothness. Her boots echoed softly, controlled, rhythmic, absurdly loud in the lingering silence. 5,000 civilizations watched her leave. No one spoke. No one intervened. No one called her back. They never did. Because rejection, Elia knew, was not hatred. Hatred required emotion. Was risk management. Halfway to the exit corridor, she allowed herself one brief glance upward. Not at the delegates. At the architecture. At the colossal systems of a civilization that had never needed humanity. Not yet. Then she passed through the threshold. And the doors of the celestial assembly closed behind her. 17th denial. 17th silence. 17th reminder. The galaxy still did not trust monsters. Even the ones asking politely. Outside, Elera burned in immaculate beauty. The corridor beyond the assembly chamber was blindingly bright. Not harsh. Refined. Light diffused from seamless walls of living crystal, glowing with soft, ambient radiance calibrated for the comfort of thousands of species simultaneously. The air was perfectly balanced, temperature, pressure, chemical composition all tuned to diplomatic neutrality. Elia Saren hated it. Not because it was unpleasant. Because it was fragile. Everything about Eliran design radiated the same assumption. Nothing here will ever need to endure violence. Her boots moved in steady rhythm along the polished floor, their reflections trailing beneath her like a shadow that refused to detach. Behind her, the doors of the celestial assembly remained closed. Ahead, the long walk to the docking spires stretched through gardens suspended in artificial gravity fields. Elera was beautiful in a way Earth had never been. Perfectly symmetrical terraces drifted between crystal arches. Water flowed upward in sculpted streams, forming shapes too precise to be natural. Flora from 1,000 worlds bloomed in controlled harmony, their colors soft, their structures elegant, their survival entirely dependent on invisible systems. Nothing struggled. Nothing fought. Nothing adapted. Elia passed delegates moving in hushed clusters. No one met her eyes. Some dimmed their bioluminescence as she approached. Others adjusted trajectory paths. Avoidance without hostility. Fear without aggression. It was almost polite. Near the docking spires, A familiar figure leaned against a structural column of white alloy. Captain Darian Holt. He looked exactly like what the assembly imagined when they thought of humanity. Broad-shouldered, weathered. The Terran naval uniform sat on him with casual indifference, sleeves rolled, collar slightly loosened. A pale scar cut diagonally across his cheek, old, clean, permanent. He straightened as Elia approached. "How bad?" he asked. No ceremony. No false optimism. Just the question that mattered. Elia removed her diplomatic gloves slowly, flexing her fingers as though reacquainting herself with her own hands. "Standard outcome," she said. Darian exhaled softly through his nose. 17th. 17th. He nodded once. Not surprised. Not angry. Acceptance born from repetition. Around them, Elera shimmered in impossible serenity. Delegates drifted through gardens. Water sang softly through sculpted channels. Somewhere distant, harmonic resonance systems produced tones designed to reduce stress responses across multiple nervous system architectures. Elia Saren sat heavily on a low crystal bench. The motion was small. But human fatigue always looked heavier than alien fatigue. Darian remained standing. "They're still afraid," she said. "You always say that. Because it's always true." She studied him for a moment. "You ever get tired of being right in deeply unhelpful ways?" Darian shrugged lightly. Occupational hazard. Silence settled between them. But unlike the assembly's silence, this one was comfortable. Human silence rarely carried judgment. There was no irony in his voice. No sarcasm. Only calm certainty. Fear means they're paying attention. A faint smile tugged briefly at the corner of Elia's mouth that it wasn't bitterness. Just observation. Darian followed her gaze toward the distant curve of Elera's horizon, visible through a vast transparent arch. "Good," he said. Elia turned her head slightly. There was no irony in his voice. No sarcasm. Only calm certainty. Fear means they're paying attention. A faint smile tugged briefly at the corner of Elia's mouth. "You always say that. Because it's always true." She studied him for a moment. "You ever get tired of being right in deeply unhelpful ways?" Darian shrugged lightly. Occupational hazard. Silence settled between them. But unlike the assembly's silence, this one was comfortable. Human silence rarely carried judgment. Mostly shared processing. "They think classification is destiny," Elia said at last. Darian tilted his head slightly. "They think stability is safety." She stared at the flowing gardens. "They built a civilization that assumes the universe is reasonable." Darian's eyes hardened faintly. "The universe has never been reasonable." Another pause. Elia leaned back slightly, exhaustion creeping into her posture now that performance was no longer required. 17 times, she said quietly. Darian nodded. "So we come back in 18th. Her eyes flicked toward him. There was the human constant. Persistence without drama. "You really believe they'll change their minds?" she asked. Darian was silent for several seconds. Not hesitation. Consideration. "I believe," he said evenly, "that sooner or later something is going to happen that makes the assembly need a species like us." Elia Saren watched him carefully. He wasn't smiling. Wasn't gloating. Wasn't hopeful. Just stating probability. "And when that day comes," he continued, "we won't have to argue philosophy. The beat. We'll be demonstrating function." Elia looked back toward Eller. Perfect. Peaceful. Unprepared. She sighed softly. "That's a grim prediction." Darian's voice was quiet. "It's not a prediction." The pause. "It's a pattern." Elia Saren said nothing. Because deep down, she knew he was right. Across history, humanity had rarely been invited. Mostly required. Darian pushed away from the column. "Come on," he said. "Shuttle's waiting." Elia stood slowly. Together, they walked toward the Terran vessel docked awkwardly among Eliran's spires of crystal and light. It was darker. Heavier. Armored. It did not glow. It endured. Behind them, Elera continued shining. untouched by the simple truth both humans understood without needing to say it aloud. The universe always collects its debts, and civilizations built on peace rarely enjoy the first payment. Far beyond Eller, far beyond the trade corridors, the diplomatic nexuses, the carefully mapped constellations of civilized space, something moved. It did not resemble a ship, nor a fleet, nor any structure recognizable to minds born within the current age of the galaxy. It was vast. But vast was an inadequate word, a linguistic compromise used by smaller things attempting to describe scales they were never meant to comprehend. It drifted between galaxies, where light itself thinned into isolation, where distances were measured not in units of space, but in eras of time. It had no name. Names required observers. Observers required survivors. And nothing that had encountered it had survived long enough to create language around the experience. It simply existed, ancient beyond meaning, patient beyond calculation. Across the intergalactic void, its structure, if structure was the correct interpretation, unfolded like a slow rearrangement of darkness itself. Not solid, not fluid, a shifting geometry of matter and energy intertwined at scales that defied conventional physics. Inside it, processes occurred. Not thoughts. Not emotions. Functions. Reflexes refined across the consumption of civilizations that had risen and vanished before most stars currently burning had even formed. It did not hate. It did not hunger. Not in any way recognizable to biological minds. It executed. That was its nature. That was its continuity. Across unimaginable distance, filaments of detection extended outward, not beams, not signals, but distortions in probability space itself. They touched the edge of a spiral galaxy. Energetic, crowded with light. The Milky Way. Within its rotating arms, billions of stars burned in intricate gravitational choreography. Electromagnetic noise filled the interstellar medium, the chaotic signature of life and technology layered atop one another. To younger civilizations, the galaxy would have appeared magnificent. To the entity, it was data, energy density, matter distribution, signal complexity. One region registered higher concentrations of structured emissions, artificial, persistent, self-modifying. The entity adjusted trajectory. The movement was microscopic relative to its scale. But across cosmic distances, microscopic shifts rewrote destinies. Within its unfathomable interior, processes accelerated. Not excitement. Optimization. It had encountered life before. Countless times. Across countless galaxies. The outcome had never varied. Systems emerged. Systems consumed resources. Systems collapsed. The entity remained. Probability curves confirmed familiar patterns. Localized civilizations. Finite energy structures. Predictable resistance. No deviation required. It began to move faster. Still slow by human perception. Still inevitable by galactic standards. Still utterly unstoppable by anything that had ever existed within observational memory. On the outer frontier of civilized space, a monitoring array drifted in silent orbit around a dying star. Designation: Sentinel Relay 7 Theta. Function: Background radiation analysis. Threat probability rating: Negligible. Its systems registered an anomaly. A fluctuation in deep field energy signatures. Minute. Barely distinguishable from natural variance. The station's artificial intelligence flagged the reading automatically. Anomaly detected confidence. Low recommended action. Routine report. The data packet entered transmission queues. One among trillions. Across the Concord networks, automated systems processed logistics, trade flows, stellar mapping updates, atmospheric corrections, diplomatic scheduling, resource allocations. Routine information drowned significance. The anomaly report joined them. Time-stamped. Categorized. Ignored. No civilization could afford to panic over every statistical irregularity. No bureaucracy could function if uncertainty carried weight. The systems moved on. The anomaly grew. Not dramatically. Not violently. Just steadily. Where there should have been light, there was slightly less. Where radiation patterns should have been symmetrical, the monitoring station updated its analysis. Anomaly confidence, moderate recommended action, priority review. The second report entered the network. Still small. Still buried beneath civilizations confident in their stability. Still unread. Across the void between galaxies, the entity advanced. Closer. Unhurried. Because time, to something that had survived longer than stars, was not a constraint. Inside the Milky Way, civilizations debated policy. Managed trade disputes. Argued ethics. Adjusted border treaties. Denied petitions. Built monuments to continuity. Secure in the quiet assumption shared by all long-lived systems. The worst dangers were already known. Already classified. Already accounted for. They were wrong. And the darkness continued moving. The colony world of Ardentis 9 was not important. That was its defining characteristic. It orbited a dim orange star near the outer boundary of Concord space, a modest settlement established primarily for resource extraction and long-range survey support. Its surface was dry, wind-scoured, mineral-rich, valuable enough to justify habitation, insignificant enough to avoid attention. Population, 62,000. Species, mixed. Karate miners. Vethari engineers. Luminari energy harvesters. A scattering of smaller trade-linked populations. It was, by every administrative metric, ordinary. Which was why no one panicked when Ardentis 9 missed its morning transmission window. Communication delays were common on frontier worlds. Atmospheric interference. Relay drift. Localized system faults. The Concord Communication Authority flagged the absence automatically. Status, signal interruption probability, technical failure action, diagnostic request. The request entered the queue. One among millions. No urgency assigned. No alarm raised. 3 hours later, Ardentis 9 remained silent. A secondary classification updated. Status, prolonged interruption probability, infrastructure failure action, relay verification. Still routine. Still procedural. Still unremarkable. 6 hours later, nearby relay node K44 attempted direct handshake protocols. No response. The authority escalated. Status, communication blackout recommended action, localized investigation. A survey vessel was dispatched. Designation, Pathfinder-class recon unit, Silver Crest. Crew, 11. Mission profile, systems diagnostics, relay repair, emergency response if required. Estimated concern level, minimal. The Silver Crest entered Ardentis 9 orbit 12 hours later. Its sensors registered the colony immediately. Structures intact. Orbital platforms present. Power grid, active. That was the first inconsistency. Energy signatures remained stable. Reactor cores online. Atmospheric processors functioning. No transmissions. No traffic control signals. No automated system chatter. Silence where there should have been noise. Running visual sweep, the Crest's systems officer said. The main display filled with imagery. Cities. Mining complexes. Transit networks. All operational. All empty. No movement. No vehicles. No maintenance drones. No thermal clusters indicating biological presence. Life signs scans negative, another voice reported. The pause. Negative across all spectrums. The bridge fell silent. Because that was not routine. The first boarding team descended 20 minutes later. Standard precautionary protocol. Environmental suits sealed. Weapons carried but inactive. They entered Ardentis 9's primary habitation sector. Gravity normal. Atmosphere breathable. Temperature controlled. Everything perfectly functional. And utterly devoid of life. Personal effects remained. Tools. Devices. Food preparation sequences halted mid-cycle. A child's learning interface still projecting soft light into an empty room. Nothing disturbed. Nothing damaged. Nothing alive. Where did they go? Someone whispered. No one answered. Because no sensor, no scan, no analysis returned anything resembling explanation. In orbit above the world, the Silver Crest's long-range arrays detected movement. At the edge of the system. Not fast. Not aggressive. Present. Contact, the tactical officer said sharply. The display shifted. Something enormous drifted beyond Ardentis 9's outer debris field. Mass readings unstable. Energy signature, unknown. Structure, indeterminate. It did not resemble a vessel. It resembled an absence of light shaped into form. Attempting communication. Standard protocols initiated. Greeting sequences. Mathematical constants. Multispectrum signal broadcast. Silence. The thing continued drifting. Unchanged. Uninterested. It reacted. No visible weapons discharge. No detectable energy spike. A beam. Impossible. The Silver Crest did not explode. Did not fracture. Did not burn. The system simply stopped. Power grid collapse. Reactor failure. Emergency backups. Drained instantly. Inside the vessel, 11 minds vanished into darkness. No distress signal transmitted. No final words recorded. One moment. Operational. Dead metal drifting in orbit around a silent world. Back in Concord space, monitoring systems updated Ardentis 9 status. Status, investigation vessel non-responsive probability, cascading system failure. Still no panic. Not yet. Because civilizations built on stability resist catastrophic interpretation. Even when catastrophe has already begun. 3 days later, relay node K44 went silent. Then relay node H12. Then survey outpost Meridian. No explosions. No debris. No warnings. Lights going out. One by one. Across the frontier. And finally, someone began paying attention. Panic did not arrive all at once. Civilizations as old as the Concorde did not panic easily. They categorized. They analyzed. They convened committees. Inside the Celestial Assembly, the chamber filled again, though this time the silence felt different. Not ceremonial. Not composed. Uneasy. Projection spheres ignited across the hall, casting layers of data into the air. Colony markers. Trade routes. Relay networks. Red indicators blooming along the frontier like a spreading infection. Veil Torrens stood at the center, luminous filaments flickering with elevated processing activity. Confirmed status update. His voice carried through the minds of 5,000 civilizations. 32 frontier installations have ceased transmission. Murmurs rippled outward. Not disbelief. Calculation. 7 reconnaissance vessels non-responsive. The chamber darkened slightly as the projections shifted. Sensor recordings unfolded. Silent cities. Active power grids. Empty worlds. Silver Crest's final telemetry. The impossible beam. Total energy collapse. No explosion signature. No residual debris. Erasure. Even species incapable of fear registered discomfort now. Because this pattern violated fundamental assumptions. Conflict left damage. Disasters left traces. Predation left remains. Left nothing. The first speakers were predictable. The Vethari Coalition, masters of systems engineering. Infrastructure contagion scenario, their delegate transmitted. Recommend immediate quarantine protocols. The Karate War Guild, pragmatic, direct. Unknown hostile presence. Recommend armed response. The Luminari, radiant, unsettled. Communication failure across all attempts. Recommend expanded contact initiatives. 5,000 civilizations, 5,000 interpretations. Order through discourse. Stability through procedure. Within hours, the Concorde Defense Authority mobilized. Not frantically, elegantly. Their fleets had not fought a true war in nearly 9 centuries, yet they remained formidable by every known metric. Simulations perfected, doctrines refined, technologies unparalleled. 600 vessels assembled at the Viren corridor. A demonstration of civilized power. The formations were flawless. Command networks synchronized. Probability engines calculating optimal engagement strategies in real time. Fleet Commander HFY presided from the crystalline warship Radiant Resolve. His species, the Sci-Fi, perceived combat as mathematics. Variables. Solutions. Outcomes. Long-range sensors detected the anomaly mass before visual confirmation. It filled space ahead like a distortion in reality itself. HFY initiated first contact doctrine. Multispectrum greetings transmitted. Mathematical constants. Energy pattern harmonics. Signals designed across millennia to communicate one simple truth. We are here. We wish to understand. Silence. The anomaly drifted forward. Unchanged. Escalation authorization requested. A tactical node reported. HFY hesitated for precisely 0.8 seconds. Authorized. 600 Concorde vessels opened fire. Plasma lances. Gravitic shears. Focused light weapons bright enough to scar planetary surfaces. The barrage illuminated the void in catastrophic brilliance. And accomplished nothing. Energy signatures vanished upon contact. Absorbed. Not deflected. Not resisted. Consumed. The anomaly responded. Dark beams lanced outward. Concorde ships did not explode. They died. Instantaneous system collapse. Reactor drains. Command networks fragmenting into cascading failure. Formation integrity disintegrated. Adaptive maneuvering. HFY transmitted. But Concorde doctrine was built on prediction. Optimization. Perfect response to known variables. The anomaly did not behave like a known variable. It did not prioritize targets logically. It did not follow engagement symmetry. It simply executed maximum efficiency consumption patterns. Smaller constructs detached from the mass. Hundreds. Thousands. They did not fire. They attached. Ships were dismantled mid-flight, hulls peeled apart like fragile membranes, matter and energy drawn into alien structures with mechanical indifference. The battle lasted 74 minutes. Of 600 Concorde vessels, 41 escaped. Fleet Commander HFY did not. His final transmission, recorded by retreating command nodes, carried no fear. Only incomprehension. Enemy behavior non-optimizable. The pause. Predictive models failing. Silence. Back in Concorde space, civilizations built on stability encountered something they had not experienced in nearly a millennium. Defeat. Not theoretical. Not simulated. Across the celestial assembly, the projections updated. 600 vessels, red. Frontier losses escalating. Trajectory models, catastrophic. And somewhere, buried beneath layers of bureaucratic calm, a truth began forcing its way into collective awareness. This was not an incident. This was not an anomaly. This was not a problem. Was extinction physics in motion. Earth did not panic. Earth accelerated. Deep beneath the Pacific Orbital Command Nexus, layers of reinforced alloy and kinetic shielding separated the Strategic Response Directorate from the fragile calm of civilian space. Inside, the atmosphere was colder. Not in temperature. In tone. Admiral Sarah Kane stood at the center of the command well, surrounded by descending rings of tactical displays. Her silver-threaded hair was cut close to the scalp. Her posture was rigid, economical, precise. Around her, humans worked in focused silence. No raised voices. No visible fear. Only motion. Efficient. Relentless. Because humanity had been waiting for this moment since long before the Concorde knew it existed. Frontier telemetry cross-confirmed, a systems analyst reported. The display shifted. Concorde fleet destruction. Dark beams. Energy collapse signatures. Matter absorption patterns. Admiral Kane watched without blinking. Loss ratios? Concorde engagement group, 93.1% asset failure. The pause. No measurable enemy degradation. Another display unfolded. Predictive modeling overlays. Failure trees. Unknown variable projections. Enemy classification? Kane asked. Lieutenant Arun Malik, Threat Analysis Division, answered immediately. Non-communicative. Non-reactive to deterrence. Consumption priority behavior. The beat does not exhibit conventional hostility markers. Kane nodded once. Predator. Malik hesitated slightly. Yes, ma'am. New data constructs ignited. Human comparative archives. Historical threat profiles. Extinction scenarios. Pattern recognition engines overlaying alien telemetry with 10,000 years of human conflict memory. General Rice, Terran Marine Command, leaned forward slightly. What did they do wrong? Malik didn't hesitate this time. Everything that works against rational opponents. Displays flickered. Concord formation structures. Symmetrical engagement geometries. Predictive optimization loops. They fought like engineers, Malik continued. Clean lines. Stable vectors. Maximum efficiency response. Ashkel's final transmission echoed across the display. Predictive models failing. Malik exhaled slowly. The enemy isn't reacting emotionally. The beat. It's processing. Admiral Kane's eyes sharpened. Difference. Malik activated another layer. Human combat modeling. Chaotic vector shifts. Nonlinear maneuvers. Sacrificial probing behavior. Emotionally reactive enemies can be manipulated. Processing systems adapt only when inputs break prediction structures. He turned slightly. The Concord fights to preserve order. The pause. We fight to survive collapse. Silence settled across the command well. Heavy. Understanding. General Rice spoke quietly. Threat scale? Malik brought up the deep field projections. The anomaly mass. Now designated. Entity classification. Extragalactic consumption swarm. It stretched across space like a wound in reality. Several thousand autonomous constructs confirmed. Energy drain weapon systems. Matter assimilation capability. Adaptive resistance unknown. Projected timeline bloomed in red. Core Concord worlds, 6.2 months. No one spoke. Because humans understood timelines like that instinctively. Not as numbers. As urgency. Admiral Kane finally turned from the display. Mobilization posture? Rear Admiral Chin answered. Reserve fleets activating. Mothballed assets rearmed. Industrial conversion underway. Strategic weapons authorization pending. Kane nodded. Pending. Chin hesitated. Political authorization protocols, ma'am. The room fell very quiet. Kane's voice was calm. Deadly calm. Extinction scenarios void political latency. The beat. Authorize. Across Earth's orbital infrastructure, dormant shipyards ignited. Construction lights blazed to life. Warships long sealed in preservation docks awakened from silence. Factories shifted output matrices. Civilian production, military acceleration. On Luna, antimatter containment arrays spun into active cycles. On Mars, reserve battalions received activation codes. Across Terran space, humanity moved with terrifying efficiency. Not because they were fearless. Because they were familiar with catastrophe. Back in the command well, Malik studied the anomaly behavior models. There's something else, he said quietly. Kane looked toward him. Speak. The swarm isn't targeting. Displays shifted. Consumption patterns. Non-strategic erasure. Colony worlds. Warships. Infrastructure. No distinction. It's not hostile, Malik said. The pause. It's thorough. No one mistook the implication. Hostility implied intent. Thoroughness implied inevitability. Admiral Kane nodded slowly. Good. Several officers looked toward her. Not confusion. Anticipation. Hostile systems can be negotiated with. Inevitable systems, she said quietly, can only be broken. General Rice's expression hardened. Concord hasn't asked for help. Kane's eyes returned to the red projections. They will. The beat. They always do. Silence. the line that settled into the room like steel locking into place. Begin full-spectrum war simulation cycles. Find weaknesses. Find patterns. Find failure points. Her gaze sharpened. And when the Concorde finally calls the monsters, the pause. Make sure we're ready to answer. Across the stars, the consumption swarm drifted forward. Unhurried, unstoppable, unaware of the one statistical anomaly it had not yet modeled. A species that did not fear extinction, because extinction had been chasing it since the beginning. And humanity had learned how to chase back. The celestial assembly had never looked like this. Its luminous architecture, once a symbol of eternal stability, now pulsed with erratic fluctuations. Light patterns flickered. Harmonic resonance systems strained under elevated neural traffic. Defensive fields hummed at barely restrained thresholds. Fear had entered the chamber. Not the sharp fear of sudden violence, but the slow, suffocating dread of approaching inevitability. Above the assembly floor, the galactic projection burned red. Frontier worlds, dark. Fleet assets, collapsing. Consumption swarm trajectory, unchanged. Projected time to first core civilization contact, 5.1 months. 5,000 civilizations watched extinction approach with the terrible clarity of mathematics that offered no escape variable. Veiltorin's luminous strands were rigid, processing stress posture. Emergency session continuation. No one murmured now. No one debated. Debate required options. The swarm does not alter trajectory, the Defense Authority transmitted. Weapon systems ineffective. Predictive modeling unstable. Loss ratios unsustainable. Every update was worse, because every update confirmed the same truth. Civilized warfare doctrines were useless. It was the luminary delegate who broke the silence. Radiance dimmed. Voice trembling. There is another possibility. 5,000 perceptions shifted. Veiltorin's filaments tightened. State proposal. The luminary hesitated. Even now. Even here. Because the proposal violated centuries of consensus judgment. Humanity. The word landed like a shockwave. Across the chamber, reaction cascades ignited instantly. Luminescent spikes. Defensive field surges. Probability matrices fracturing under emotional interference. The category apex hazard species? Unacceptable risk. They are destabilizing agents. They are not assembly members. They are not trusted. 5,000 civilizations recoiled reflexively from the idea. Even extinction did not easily erase prejudice. Veiltorin's voice cut through the chamber. Cold. Precise. Proposal relevance? The luminary delegate forced coherence. They evolved in instability. They demonstrate crisis adaptation behaviors. They operate effectively under catastrophic conditions. The pause. They are already mobilizing. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Because that last statement carried weight. New projections ignited. Terran space. Fleet activation signatures. Industrial conversion spikes. Weapons production acceleration curves. Humans were not panicking. They were preparing. The Karate War Guild spoke next. Reluctantly. Grudgingly. Their combat history is extensive. The Defense Authority added. Human adaptive volatility may present unpredictable engagement variables. The beat. Unpredictability may disrupt swarm optimization models. 5,000 civilizations processed the implication. Slowly. Painfully. Because now the logic was undeniable. Veiltorin dimmed fractionally. The assembly equivalent of hesitation. Risk analysis. Projection matrices recalculated. Humanity. Unstable. Aggressive. Extremely high collateral probability. Also, only species demonstrating sustained war-fighting evolution across deep history. Only species showing performance enhancement under extreme stress. Only species already modeling the swarm as a predator-class threat. The numbers stabilized. Terrible. Inevitable. Survival probability without humanity, 0.03%. Survival probability with humanity, unknown. Unknown. Not good. Not safe. But infinitely greater than extinction certainty. The chamber fell into a silence unlike any it had ever known. Not fear. Not debate. Resignation. Veil Tauren's luminous strands shifted slowly. Decision geometry. Diplomatic contact authorization. A shock ripple spread across the assembly. No one protested. Because mathematics had already ended argument. White flag protocol initiated. A procedure untouched for nearly 3 centuries. Reserved for scenarios beyond power projection. Beyond deterrence. Beyond pride. Veil Tauren turned toward the projection of Earth. Blue. Violent. Necessary. Delegation selection? There was no discussion. No politics. Only inevitability. Veil Tauren's voice resonated one final time. Heavy with procedural gravity. Arch-mediator Veil Tauren will lead diplomatic envoy. The pause. Humanity will be approached. Another pause. The words settling across 5,000 civilizations like the quiet collapse of arrogance. Assistance will be requested. For the first time in assembly history, no one found comfort in procedure, because every mind present understood the truth behind the formality. Civilization had reached the point where survival required trusting monsters. Far beyond Concord space, the consumption swarm advanced. Unhurried, unaware, and in Terran orbit, human fleets waited, exactly as they always had. For the moment the universe finally admitted it had made a mistake. Geneva Orbital Station did not glow. It endured. Where Concord structures shimmered with elegance and soft light, Geneva was an arrangement of armored geometry, layered plating, exposed weapon arrays, sensor clusters rotating with constant vigilance. Nothing about it was decorative. Everything about it was prepared. The Concord delegation vessel drifted toward the station under full white flag protocol, its luminous hull looking almost fragile against the brutal silhouette of Terran defensive architecture. Escort destroyers surrounded it. Silent. Heavily armed. Inside the docking corridor, the contrast was immediate. No living crystal. No harmonic lighting. Only reinforced alloy walls marked by repair welds and impact scarring. Emergency bulkheads lined every junction. Pressure suits hung beside sealed compartments. Fortress first. Facility second. The delegates felt it. Even species without traditional fear responses registered the oppressive density of Terran design philosophy. This place expected disaster, and had no illusions about its arrival. They were led into a conference chamber deep within the station. Plain. Functional. A single viewport revealed Earth hanging below, blue, turbulent, alive. Commander Elia Saren stood near the glass. Black diplomatic uniform. Stillness weaponized into composure. She did not smile when Veil Tauren entered. Did not bow. Did not acknowledge history. She simply watched. Human eyes were deeply unsettling up close, predator optics. Constant evaluation. Admiral Sarah Kane entered moments later. No ceremony preceded her. No announcement. Her presence did not require one. Dark Terran Navy uniform. Service ribbons. Rank insignia. Authority carried not by decoration, but gravity. She sat. Opened a data slate. Looked directly at Veil Tauren. Explain. No greetings. No diplomacy. Just the word. The Concord delegation hesitated, instinctively searching for procedural rhythm. There was none. Veil Tauren adjusted. Extragalactic consumption swarm advancing through Concord territory. Displays activated. Loss projections. Fleet destruction telemetry. Extinction timelines. Kane watched without visible reaction. We lost 600 vessels in primary engagement, Veil Tauren continued. Weapon systems ineffective. Enemy non-communicative. Trajectory unchanged. The pause. Projected survival probability approaching null. Silence. Admiral Kane's voice was calm. Clinical. Confirmed weaknesses? The Defense Authority representatives stiffened. None identified. Kane nodded once, as if expecting that answer. Acceptable losses. The words hit the delegation like physical force. Radiance fields flickered violently. Several delegates recoiled. Veiltorin's filaments destabilized briefly. Clarify. Kane leaned forward slightly. How many ships? How many populations? How many worlds are you prepared to lose before strategic doctrine changes? The chamber froze. Because this was not a Concord question. The Luminary delegate's glow dimmed sharply. Loss minimization is foundational doctrine. Kane's eyes hardened. That doctrine is already failing. No hostility, just fact. The swarm does not negotiate, she continued, does not deter, does not respond to force projection. The beat, which means survival requires asymmetrical engagement strategies. Another beat, strategies that incur losses. Silence, heavy, unavoidable, because extinction mathematics had already made the argument for her. Veiltorin stabilized his luminous structure. Human strategic doctrine proposes what probability threshold? Kane did not hesitate. There is no painless solution. The pause. Only survivable ones. The delegation processed that slowly, painfully, because civilized civilizations avoided framing reality that way. Then Kane delivered the pivot. Here are humanity's terms. The displays shifted. Text constructs forming with brutal clarity. Term 1. Full Terran Operational Command Authority. Term 2. Unified Tactical Doctrine Enforcement. Term 3. Post-conflict Concord membership recognition. The chamber erupted. Outrage cascades detonated across multiple species. Defensive field spiked. Luminescence patterns fractured. This violates assembly sovereignty protocols. Command authority cannot be transferred. Membership status requires deliberation cycles. Kane did not react, did not argue, did not raise her voice. She waited. Predators understood silence better than diplomats. When the chamber finally stabilized, she spoke quietly. You came to us because your civilization cannot stop what is coming. The beat. You do not get our blood. The pause. And then negotiate the price. The words landed with lethal precision, because every delegate knew they were true. Veiltorin's luminous form dimmed slightly. Processing stress. Conditional compromise parameters? No. Flat. Absolute. Silence. Extinction projections hovered above them. Unforgiving. Veiltorin turned slowly toward Earth's image beyond the viewport. Violent. Necessary. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 5,000 civilizations swallowing pride. The Concord accepts humanity's terms. No triumph registered on Kane's face. No satisfaction. Only immediate transition to function. Good. She rose. Displays shifted again. Fleet mobilization sequences igniting. Then let's begin. Because humanity did not negotiate survival. They executed it. War mobilization did not begin with ships. It began with people. Across Terran space, alerts propagated through military and civilian networks alike, not with panic-inducing alarms, but with quiet, unmistakable authority. Strategic response directive activated reserve status recall initiated. Humanity had rehearsed extinction before. Many times. In a small apartment overlooking the Nairobi Sky Rail, Staff Sergeant Malik Okoye sat cross-legged on the floor beside his daughter. She was 5 years old. Curly hair. Serious eyes. Holding a tablet projecting animated constellations across the ceiling. Again, she demanded. Malik smiled faintly. You've heard this one 3 times. Again. Outside, traffic lanes pulsed with accelerated movement. Inside, the room remained warm, soft, stubbornly normal. Malik adjusted the tablet and began reading. And the explorer looked into the dark between stars and said, a chime interrupted. So, polite. Terminal priority override. Malik's eyes flicked to the corner of his retinal display. Recall status, active. The smile did not vanish. But something behind it changed. Duty call? His daughter asked. Children of soldiers learned recognition early. Malik nodded slowly. Duty call. She considered this with grave intensity, then handed him the tablet. Finish first. Malik swallowed once, then continued reading, because promises mattered, especially now. On Luna, Dr. Asha Verne stood in Medical Integration Bay 3, surrounded by projections of alien anatomy. Multiple species, multiple biochemistries, multiple impossibilities. Her assistants moved rapidly around her. Update cross-reactivity protocols. Adjust metabolic compatibility buffers. Expand neural trauma response matrices. Dr. Verne had spent 12 years studying physiology she was never certain humanity would be allowed to treat. Every preparation became necessary. War doesn't just break soldiers, she said quietly. It breaks everything. In the chapel compartment aboard carrier Resolute Dawn, Chaplain David Ibarra stood before a crowded room. Uniforms filled the benches. Navy, Marines, pilots, engineers, some believers, some skeptics, all facing the same truth. Ibarra did not speak of gods. Not today. We are going to fight for civilizations that feared us, he said calmly. For species that classified us as hazards. The pause. For worlds that denied us 17 times. Silence. Heavy. Human. We do not fight because they deserve it. Another pause. We fight because someone is afraid. The beat. And that has always been enough. No applause followed. Only stillness. Which meant understanding. In Martian Training Complex Red Sector, reserve battalions thundered back into motion. Boots striking composite flooring. Weapons systems recalibrated. Muscle memory awakening. Veterans returning without hesitation. Not fearless. Never fearless. Familiar with catastrophe. On Geneva Station's observation deck, Concorde delegates watched human Marines running combat simulations. The movements were violent, precise, terrifyingly fast. But what unsettled the observers most was not aggression. It was cohesion. Individual humans moving like extensions of a shared instinct. Separate minds. Single response. The Luminari delegate Soleth dimmed in visible confusion. How? He whispered. A Terran instructor beside him answered without looking away from the exercise. We don't train them to run toward death. Soletha's glow flickered. Then what? The instructor pointed. A Marine fell, simulation marker flashing red. 3 others moved instantly. Point 1 covering. 2 retrieving. No hesitation. No calculation. Only motion. We train them, the instructor said quietly, to run toward each other. Across Terran space, fleets ignited. Shipyards blazing with industrial fury. Weapon arrays armed. Engines awakened. But beneath steel, beneath fire, beneath terrifying war machinery, humanity's true engine turned. Attachment. Promise. Refusal to abandon. Because Concorde civilizations still misunderstood something fundamental. Humanity did not fight well because they were violent. They fought well because they were bonded. Every soldier, every sailor, every pilot, every medic, moved by the same primitive, unstoppable directive that had carried the species through ice ages, extinctions, and self-inflicted catastrophes. Protect your own. And once humanity decided someone was their own, classification became irrelevant. Far beyond the frontier, the consumption swarm drifted forward. Unhurried, unaware of the most dangerous variable now entering the equation. Not weapons, not fleets, not tactics, but a species whose greatest strategic advantage was something no optimization system had ever successfully modeled. Love under threat, and the terrifying things it made humans willing to do.